You, I need free space. Yeah, you're there. Who's good? VP Frank.
Yeah, we made UCLA. We're all okay. Great. All right. We're making a plan. You know, we got to deal with the university, the higher up. Okay. All right. And, I wanted to give you a copy of this. This is James Corner from the Black Manifesto. Are you leaving me? Are you sitting here? You don't leave me.
I'm sitting right next to you.
Careful, let me move you for you. Would everyone please take their seats? The CARICOM Commission, would you please take your positions?
Tomorrow I have to bring something for you.
CARICOM Commission, National African American Commission, section for our international observers. So these two sections are our observers there. Let's get in our positions. We're ready to go. We're running behind time.
I don't know if I want to get out.
Geneva.
Take it out.
But in Libya, Charlotte was with me in Libya.
Okay.
You don't remember that,
Yeah, we were just talking. The minister had us on the ship.
That's right.
In Arabic, the ship was called.
I did that.
We all call it the
I did. I gave each one of them.
He's in the hotel.
Please take your seats. We're running now behind where we ought to be, so please take your seats. Please take your seats. Let's have everyone take your seats, please. We're missing our Caribbean commissioners.
You don't have one?
We need them in place so we can begin the conversation.
Do you have one? Do you have
Yes, I do.
This is 2 arms like that.
I doubt it. I'm on time.
No,
Leonard Jeffries.
I'm not like that. Jeremiah is not like that either until he get wound up. Jeremiah has more discipline.
give me a time.
He does. He really does. It doesn't matter what you give him. A minute, 2, or 3, or 2 hours. So don't get blessed because he didn't.
Okay, how's everybody doing? Oh, you can do better than that. Are you really doing great?
Yes.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. We got to have some energy up in here. Y'all had something to eat. I'm on ether. I haven't even grabbed this little bit. My wife is trying to make me sit down and eat something. I have to wait at the end of the day. This is too good. I don't even have time to eat. Again, my name is Ron Daniels, president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, and we are delighted to have been asked to host this gathering. How's it going so far? What do you think about it? Is it all right? We're going to make some history? All right, that's what I'm talking about. Well, this afternoon's session is designed after a very, very fruitful session this morning to have a dialogue and exchange between the newly formed, and I have to emphasize newly formed, National African American Commission and the CARICOM Commission. The way that will proceed is that we have a couple of our scholars, and by the way, we've been joined by some scholars as well, and I'll introduce all of them in a moment. The first thing we'll have is a presentation by two of our distinguished scholars, essentially talking about the African American struggle around reparations. I will then ask some of them around specific aspects to share even more, after which we want to then open it up to our CARICOM commissioners to ask questions, any questions that you would engage in that direction.
Did you get it?
After that, we also want to, based on this morning's presentation, there may have been questions that the National African American Commission may have had that they would like to ask of you.
You know you're going.
The last phase of our conversation will deal with questions of suggestions about mutual support in terms of how we might work together before we then open it up for brief interventions from our observers. And then we are committed to being out of here. We're running behind schedule, but we can't not be on schedule in terms of our conclusion. So 4:15, we have to be gathering those of us who are at the hotel on the buses so that we can get back for a quick change or whatever it's going to be. So we go to honor Congressman John Conyers this evening. So that's kind of the flow of the schedule. So we want to begin. Let me just introduce quickly the National African American persons who are here on the commission. Dr. Conrad World is here. Dr. Ray Winbush is here. Dr. Ivor Carruthers, Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright, Reverend Joanne Watson, Attorney Nkechi Taifa, Attorney Roger Wareham, Yvette Modestine is here. Salim Adolfo is here, and Minister Akbar Mohammed. We have the majority of the 15 commissioners are present. In addition, I asked, how did I do that? Cam Howard is here as well. In addition, we have asked Dr. Joyce King, who is at my right, to be with us. I won't go through, she has this big chair that she chairs at Georgia State University, but it's a formidable position and a long-time veteran of our struggle. Also, we have Dr. B.P. Franklin, and he has agreed through the Journal of African American History to be a resource to the National African American Commission. They've already issued a call for papers. Many of you have papers, proposals, ideas, and they will be the repository for those, as well as doing outreach around proposals. Also, we have Sister Desir. I see she has her book. You got your book there? A copy of your book, right? Okay, and she's an author, activist, and a number of other things who will be a part of the conversation. Well, Dr. Julianne Malvo as well. So they're all here. So we have the majority of our commission is here. So we want to begin with Dr. Conrad World and with Dr. Ray Winbush, who took pains to make a presentation at this gathering.
Good afternoon, everybody, brothers and sisters. Hotep and Baragani and Assalamu Alaikum and Black Power. I say Black Power because I'm a product of the Black Power movement and I ain't stopped saying it. That was in 1966. So Dr. Winbush and I have been collaborating for many years, and he had a chronology of the reparations movement, and I thought I knew more than him. And so I called him up and suggested that I get up underneath his leadership and that we consolidate our work and produce something that will be reflective of black people in America's organizing around this idea of reparations going back to the 18th century, into the 19th century, into the 20th century, and on into the 21st century. And so we produced a little booklet. We didn't have enough money for everybody because we did this ourselves, but we did pass out a number of these pamphlets that's a chronology of the reparations movement in America, and I'm glad it's a giveaway because some of you have read it and say, you forgot about the Black Panther Party in 1966 and the United Nations, and somebody, Julian Malveaux, said, you forgot about Robert Brown and his black. So there's a lot to the reparations movement, so I would like to call this the first draft. And those of you who read it may find that we missed some items that can be infused into this document, because the reparations movement for Africans in America is a deep movement that's had many tributaries and many stages. So let me just share a statement with you to kick this off. This is what Malcolm X said November 23rd, 1964 in Paris, France. If you are the son of a man who had a wealthy estate and you inherit your father's estate, you have to pay off the debts that your father incurred before he died. Y'all heard that? The only reason that the present generation of white Americans are in a position of economic strength is because their fathers worked our fathers for over 400 years with no pay. We were sold from plantation to plantation like you sell a house, or a cow, or a chicken, or a bushel of wheat. All that money is what gives the present generation of American whites the ability to walk around the earth with their chests out like they have some kind of economic ingenuity. Your father isn't here to pay. My father isn't here to collect. But I am here to collect, and you're here to pay. Malcolm X, November 23rd, Paris, France. So I think the way to get what we're doing in this gathering today, I think, is to try to bring back the spirit and the collective organizing of black people in the diaspora and connecting up the work with black people inside of America with the Caribbean CARICOM, to see if we can forge ways to rebuild our movement in a mass way. Because if you recall, going into the UN World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa, that had more than 15,000 participants from 165 nations in the world, the issue of reparations and the demand for reparations of African people worldwide was a mass discussion around the world. Am I right now, Dr. Hill? Can I get a witness? And so the tributaries that led to this inside the U.S. predated the Civil War. Now, I get kind of charged up, and I only have a few minutes, and I only had a few books, but we must give a shout out to Callie House.
That's right.
We have to give a shout out to her because the term that they used at that time after they faked us out on the question of 40 acres and a mule, Abraham Lincoln died, Johnson cut a deal and gave the land back to the Confederates. We all know that story, don't we? Yes. So as we moved on, this sister out of Tennessee, Callie House, began to take a page out of what the white people were doing because they were getting pensions for having been in the Civil War. So she said, well, black people ought to be the main ones to get some pensions. And she, by 1890 now, took a page from the white people's pension movement and organized the National Ex-Slave and Bounty and Pension Association that mobilized more than 600,000 or 700,000 black people going into the 1990s, demanding that ex-slaves, 1890s, thank you, ex-slaves receive pensions. And this movement culminated in 1915 in the first reparations lawsuit against the United States government in Tennessee in a federal court. So they told Callie House, in 1916, they convicted her of 1916, if I'm right, not 18, well anyway, we're colleagues. Okay, this is 1916, y'all. They indicted Callie House on mail fraud. A lot of us think that it was Garvey who was indicted first, but it was Callie House who was indicted on mail fraud charges, and Callie House, and upon her sentencing, this white judge said, we are sending you to prison because you know white folks would never give you what you're asking for. And so she did a year and a day in a federal penitentiary in Tennessee. So a shout out to Callie House, and here comes the Garvey movement. He took a hit, a great hit, and he was incarcerated, and he was indicted on mail fraud, the greatest mass movement of African people in the Western Hemisphere. One God, one aim, one destiny. And so we can just go on through these tributaries of organizing. Now the issue became for black people in America to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, racial segregation under the law. So that became the organizing thrust of black people in America to end racial segregation under the law that culminated in Brown versus the Board of Education, the Montgomery bus boycott, the evolution of the new civil rights movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we were victorious legally in shutting down and dismantling racial segregation under the law. So the question is, was that enough? And so the reparation movement was there all along. And the demand for reparations is still here, to repair the damage inflicted on African people who were captured and introduced to the Western Hemisphere and reduced to property. Do you all understand that? And so it's just too much to talk about. But let me tell you a little story. In 1996, a white reporter from the San Jose Mercury News named Gary Webb wrote a 3-part article on how crack cocaine in America was being hooked up with street organizations throughout the U.S., particularly in Southern California, and how this proliferated throughout the U.S., and the profits from this enterprise were being used to finance the Contras in Nicaragua. 3-part article. And we saw this in the National Black United Front, and at that time I was the national chairman, and we said, oh my God, this is genocide. And so we thought about a strategy. And in 1950, you know, Paul Robeson, W.E. Du Bois, and William Patterson initiated a genocide campaign in 1950, charging the United States government with genocide. Do y'all remember that? So we attempted in the National Black United Front to replicate this strategy and created a petition and circulated this petition as an organizing tool throughout the United States, and took a delegation to Geneva, Switzerland, and charged the United States government officially with genocide and the demand for reparations, with the support financially, because you know we didn't have no money to get to Geneva, Switzerland. It was financed by Minister Farrakhan, and I can say this publicly for the first time. Minister Farrakhan paid for all of our tickets to go to Geneva, Switzerland. So in order to file genocide charges against the United States government or any country in the world, it's called the 1503. This is too long to go into. But we filed official charges against the United States government, and we came back, and Attorney Roger Wellham, because we didn't know what we were doing, helped us get inside the UN in New York to present companion petitions to the UN headquarters in New York City in the spring of 1997. I'm saying all that to say that the President of the United States at that time was Bill Clinton. And when I got back to Chicago, where I live, I got a notice from the State Department that the State Department had received officially our complaint of genocide charges against the United States government. In June of 1997, Clinton gave a speech at San Diego State University on race. And in this speech, he called for a race commission and appointed John Hope Franklin as the chair. Have mercy. John Hope Franklin was from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his family had been victimized by the 1921 Tulsa riots. And so inside, when the commission convened in which John Hope Franklin was the chair, it leaked out that John Hope Franklin put on the table that the organizing issue of this commission should be reparations. John Hope Franklin. And so out of this, we began to discover that the United Nations was planning a UN World Conference Against Racism, and somehow in Cobra and the work of in Cobra, God bless Imari over there. God bless Queen Mother Mo. God bless Dorothy Lewis Benton.
Comrade,
God bless all
comrade,
the
speak more directly
founders.
into the mic.
God bless Chokwe Lamont. And all of those who came together to start the National Coalition for Blacks for Reparations in America, which was for the first time descendants of Callie House in this modern period in history that singularly focused on the issue of reparations in America. So the momentum was there. And so our organization, hooked up with the December 12th movement, had already been going in and out of the United Nations and had great expertise, and we collaborated and tried to pull together a number of the reparations forces in America to push the idea that the transatlantic slave trade, slavery and colonialism were crimes against humanity. Taking a page from Malcolm, because Malcolm said what we need to do is to internationalize, and today we're using the term globalize, our strategy to expose to the world the contradictions of the United States government. And so taking a page from Malcolm, going into the UN World Conference Against Racism, and you will be able to see a video tomorrow of the work of the group that became known as the Durban 400, that did a lot of excellent work in Durban to put this idea that the transatlantic slave trade, slavery and colonialism were crimes against humanity. We allied with the Caribbean bloc, with the Africa bloc, because if you recall in 1998, the Africa group presented a position that 1998 that the transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity, and Clinton found out about it. He called the president of Senegal and said, if you don't take this off the table, we're going to shut you down. Can I get a witness? You know what happens in crimes against humanity in international law. And so what am I saying? And I'm going to really shut it down, because we had great organizing going on around the reparations movement, because one of our weaknesses right now, in my judgment, at this period in history, is other movements have taken a page from us. The gay and lesbian movement, great organizing work. The Latino community, great organizing work on the question of immigration. But Africans in the United States have not found, since the Civil Rights Movement, a way to consolidate our organizing around a penetrating issue that we can unite on. I suggest that the penetrating issue is reparations. A meeting like this is a way to begin to find a strategy and a tactic to fire up our people across the United States, linking up now with CARICOM, who refired us up, to create a strategy to rebuild the reparations movement in America. Y'all got a witness. So when we came back from Durban, we had a big press conference in Chicago, and we were happy at the outcome, even though the language got watered down, as Dr. Hillary Beckles pointed out. We attempted to try to tap into at least a semi-victory. The the language of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery being a crime against humanity. And when we had this press conference and all the press was there in Chicago, and suddenly somebody broke in the room and said, "Conrad, stop the press conference, come over here," and I saw the planes going into the World Trade Center. And this setback of the reparations movement caused by ultra-patriotism inside the United States, now people were beginning to be scared to say reparations. And so we took a hit. Even though on August 17, 2002 in Washington, D.C., despite all of those obstacles with the momentum that came out of Durban, we organized a Millions for Reparations rally and had 50,000 people in Washington, D.C., the first reparations rally in American history, inside the belly of the beast. And so in 2003, Minister Farrakhan convened a meeting at the Salam restaurant with Reparations Act, very much similar to today's different format. And that became the Indaba movement. So what we are engaged in is a protracted struggle to rebuild the reparations movement, to repair the damages that have been inflicted on people of African descent captured in the Western Hemisphere, and hook it into whatever is happening, and most pointedly, all these killing of our young people in the streets. So we've got to find a way to make the reparations movement drop down so all of our people understand the repair that's necessary for us to become a free and whole and independent people. And so I say to you, Black Power.
Well, I have absolutely nothing else to say because Conrad said it all. But what I do want to say is this, and I'll be brief. There are three names in the history of the reparations movement in America that are very important, and two of them have been mentioned. The first one, of course, is Queen Mother Audley Moore. The second one is with who Conrad elaborated on, Callie House. And I strongly, on the second book, on the second person, recommend Mary Frances Berry's book, My Face is Black and True. And the third woman, as far as we know, is the first formal declaration of reparations in America, a woman by the name of Belinda Royale, who in 1780, after having been enslaved for 50 years, not down south as we call it in America, but in Massachusetts, her so-called master, Isaac Royal, fled the United States one day after the declaration of the American Revolutionary War because he was on the side of the British. And he went up to Canada where the so-called Loyalists were. And some of you may have seen the Book of Negroes that was on TV a few weeks ago that talked about this. But anyway, Callie House sued the state of Massachusetts, and specifically Isaac Royal, for 50 years of unpaid labor. She was illiterate, could not read. I've actually seen her petition that was written in the Boston paper in 1782, and at the bottom of it, it was an X. But I asked who wrote the petition, and the person that wrote the petition, the best that we know of, is a man by the name of Primus Hall, the founder of the Prince Hall Masons, or a sister by the name of Phyllis Wheatley, who we all know. And it's something that all of us should read, the petition of Belinda, or Belinda's petition. I think the most important thing is that most Black Americans, and I'm saying this directly to the Caribbean, most of us know about the 40 acres and a mule narrative of 1865, but as Conrad pointed out, it goes way back before that, at least 80 years before that. And it goes forward with names that oftentimes African Americans aren't aware of. For example, most of us, or some of us, know about James Foreman. In 1969, he went into Riverside Chapel here in New York City, And at the 11 o'clock service, in what is some people call the most liberal church in America, demanded $400 million in reparations and broke it down very specifically. I want to just read a couple of these. He said that he called for the establishment of a Southern land bank. Black folk in this country in 1910 owned 10 million acres of land. We are now down to about 2.5 million acres of land. And most of that land has been taken very surreptitiously and illegally by white folks. He called for the establishment of 4 major publishing and printing presses in the United States. 4 printing presses. We now have 0 that we do our own. Third World Press is out there, as well as Black Classics Press, but they are not what he called for if you read that. He wanted over $10 million. He also called for, I remember the late Bobby Wright, who Conrad and everybody know, when we were in school in Chicago together, he said, black folk, when Dr. King got shot and killed, they asked us, what do you black folk want? And we said, let's name a street after Dr. Martin Luther King. And Bobby used to say that what we should have asked for was radio and television stations so that we could communicate directly to our people on a variety of issues related to that. So James Foreman said, we call for the establishment of 4 of the most advanced scientific and futuristic audiovisual networks to be located, and here are the cities: Detroit, Chicago, my home city of Cleveland, Ohio, and Washington, D.C. This was in 1969, and he codified it in what is now known as the Black Manifesto. So I think the most important thing that Black Americans that we need to do is to move deeper into our history of the reparations struggle and know that it's more than 40 acres and a mule. And I think this meeting today is historic, that it will try to, and it, well, I'm not supposed to say this, I guess, Ron, publicly, but I am all for us joining on an international level with the people right here. That's all I got to say.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to have others of the commissioners, and by the way, as you speak, you might introduce yourself. I neglected to do that, frankly. So, Dr. Conrad World is the director of the Dr. Jacob Carruthers Center in Chicago, and as well as President Emeritus of the Black United Front. Ray Winbush is the head of at Morgan State. Your research institute is?
Institute for Urban Research.
Urban Research. Dr. Julianne Malpo is asked for the mic. President Emeritus of Bennett College for Women and Black America's leading political economist.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Conrad and Ray for laying the foundation in terms of our history. And I just wanted to augment it a little bit because I want folks to understand the economic basis for reparations. And we're not just talking about enslavement. Enslavement may be the floor, but the floor was built on. In 1863, the United States... Louder? Yes. All righty. Now, you know, I got mugged one time and the police heard me a block away. So I could probably do without the mic, but I'll use it.
Repeat what you just said so we can all hear that again. That's a very important point.
What, that I... That,
Start all over again.
Oh. All right, what I said earlier, or a few seconds ago, is I wanted folks to understand the economic underpinnings of basically income and wealth inequality today, which represent yet another reason to fight for reparations. Many people look at enslavement as the basis of reparations. Enslavement may well be the floor, but that has been built on in terms of number of other ways that our wealth has been literally taken from us. In 1863, Congress passed a law called the Homestead Act. That's right. The Homestead Act gave anybody, but not us, anybody a homestead in the western states that had been underpopulated. So essentially, white immigrants had the opportunity to go wherever and get land. Many of them became wealthy by selling that land to the railroads who wanted their right-of-way. So this was an opportunity that people of African descent pretty much did not have until the 1880s, when much of the most arable land was taken. So then we got the land with the rocks and all of that. So that represents one of the reasons we have to look at that. Conrad and Ray talked about some of the towns that were destroyed. And people frequently mention Tulsa and Rosewood. But there are probably and Wilmington, there are probably another 100 to 150 towns that were also destroyed. They have not been as well documented as those other places. And in the Tulsa place, the devil tried very hard to hide the fact that Tulsa happened. The front page of the newspaper is gone. I have had the privilege of knowing a woman named Dr. Olivia Hooker. She's the oldest living survivor of Tulsa. She's 100 years old. And she talked about how the day before the lynching that was attempted, the paper actually had a headline that said, "Negro to be lynched tomorrow." So it was announced that, but behind that, this was a thriving black community. It was a thriving black community where people lost millions of dollars. John Hope Franklin's dad was one of the people, he was a lawyer in that town. He was one of the people who lost everything. Now, losing everything may have been, quote, bad enough, but the state of Oklahoma set up it wasn't called a reparations commission, but that's pretty much what it was, to study that up, and it was a white people riot. See, whenever we do something, they call it a riot. This was a white people riot. They rioted against black wealth. The commission began its meetings in the 90s. They came to the conclusion that people should be paid, reparations, repair. They still haven't done it. The commission, which was a mixed race commission, came up with this conclusion. But the state said, oh no, we're not going to do it. And so it's still sitting in abeyance. Now there are only 8 survivors left, and they're dying literally by the day. I would commend to folks the film Before They Die, which talks about many of whom have memories of what happened there. But that becomes another case that we need to look at. The appropriation of property becomes another issue. Many African American people were given property, not, the 40 acres and a mule, but their guilty masters gave them property. But then the people in their town took it back. In my own family, we have the story of the moving fence. Their white folks gave them some property, but it included a bayou, which was very, very rich for fishing. And so people are always mad that the black folks had the bayou. They went to bed one night, Ron, they woke up, the fence had moved. Literally, the fence had moved. And they said we couldn't show the property line. One of my cousins had to leave Moss Point, Mississippi, because almost lynched, because they were going down. They had the deeds. They were going down. They had the property surveyed. I don't say this because it's my family. This happened all over the South. People just took people's land. They took people's money. In some places, there are laws that said you couldn't have but so much money in cash. In other places, so you had to give your money to a trustworthy white person. That would be an oxymoron. Like you give somebody money, they're going to give it back? Seriously. So they also, in some southern states, barred black men from owning the tools of their trade. So that you might be an iron worker. You could not have the tools of your trade, so you ended up doing something else. So systematically, the work that Conrad and Ray have done can be augmented by many of the other things that were done throughout our history and that we really haven't had a chance to look at. The Emergency Land Fund, which Conrad, I think you referenced when you talked about land, the Emergency Land Fund was founded in like 1970, and literally documented the loss of land and how this land was lost. That too is a basis for reparations. So where does that take us? There are a number of economists who have documented how much reparations would be if you simply look at the loss of wages from enslavement. However, if you fast forward and look at other opportunities for us to have amassed income and wealth, those opportunities were not available to us. So we end up with this. We end up with the average black family earning $35,000 a year, the average white family earning $55,000 a year. In 2013, we end up with the average black woman with children having an average wealth of $5. Let me repeat that. A black woman, the average black woman with children has a median wealth of $5. That's a soda. In addition, we end up with a wealth gap, depending on who's measuring it, that's between 1 in 4 and 1 in 13. Again, depending on what measurement you're using. 46% of African Americans own their homes, compared to 70% of whites. The African American community lost over $300 billion worth of wealth during the Great Recession. Redlining and other things prevented us from owning. And when we did have stuff, you had discriminatory banking practices that kept us out of ownership. The Ebony publisher, John Johnson, talked about the fact that he could not borrow money to grow his magazine, but he could borrow money using his mother's furniture as collateral when he wanted to take a vacation. So there was a serious discrimination. So we have a lot to look at and a lot to document in terms of what has been done to us and what we need to be repaid for. And enslavement, again, is the foundation, but on that foundation, you build a capitalistic caste system. A capitalistic caste system which has never, even now, treated African Americans the same way they treated others. Bob Johnson tried to buy U.S. Air years ago, about 15 years ago. He tried to, U.S. Air has always been in trouble. Now they merged with American. But at one point he tried to buy it. There was Maxine Waters had passed some legislation that if there were capital things available, African Americans should have first crack. So Bob Johnson is probably the only black person we know who could buy an airline. The Congress of the United States was recorded as saying real stupid stuff like, what is he gonna serve? Fried chicken? All your racist stereotypes. But in addition, I mean, what if he did serve fried chicken? But in addition, they essentially blocked the sale. So there are a series of economic trigger points that when we document them, suggest that we want to look at other things than enslavement. And I think that my brothers and sisters in CARICOM have some of the same challenges in terms of the loss of land, not the loss of land, the taking of land. And I think those are some of the things that we really want to look at. Thank you.
Wanted to turn to Roger, Mr. It's going to make me call you, going to give you an upgrade. Minister Akbar, would you care to intervene at this point?
Thank you very much. My name is Akbar Mohammed. I'm Minister Farrakhan.
We need you to speak right into the mic, though, consistently. Just hold it right and speak right into the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Akbar Mohammed. I'm Minister Farrakhan's international representative. I represent